All right. Well, with that, I'll call this meeting to order at 1:31. Thank you everyone for coming to the MetroPlan TAC meeting on May 26th. Go ahead and get started with a roll call. I'm here. Nick Hall, Jason James.
Here.
Ann Deno.
Here. Thank you.
Rick Barrett.
He's
Nate. Okay. Do we have Nate Reisner on today? I believe so. Dan Folk. Jeff Bauman.
I'm here.
All right. Greg Mace.
Present.
Ed Stillings.
Here.
All right. And then for MetroPlan staff, we got Jeff Malback.
Here.
David Wessel.
Here, and I believe you need to back up to Jess McNeely.
Jess McNeely, you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
Perfect. And then back to MetroPlan staff, Rosie.
I'm here.
Okay.
And we do have others in attendance.
All right.
I see Brett Peterson. That's all that I'm aware of.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Brett. And are there any members of the public that wish to come forward and have a comment? Hearing none, I think we can move into approval of minutes. All right. And can I get a motion for the approval of last meeting's minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the last minutes. This is Ann Dunham.
Okay. Do I have a second?
This is Jason James, and I will second that.
All right. We have a motion to approve the minutes from last time. Motion by Ann Dunham, second by Jason James. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take it to a vote. Those in favor of approving last meeting's minutes, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Those opposed, no. All right, motion carries. Okay. And that will take us into, do we have any items on the consent agenda? I don't see any on our agenda. Just want to double check. Okay. Then that will take us into our general business. And I'd like to start by asking MetroPlan staff, do we need to reorganize anything today, or can we start and go down the list?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman. I think we can just go right down the list.
Excellent. All right. Well, then let's start with item A, the FY 2022 budget discussion. Jeff, would you like to take it away?
Yes, I'm going to start with this and then turn it over to Dave, who is going to do a PowerPoint presentation. With the 22 budget discussion, there's a strategic work plan item that came out of the April advance, and the TAC and the board approved the strategic work plan last month. And the item is to evaluate the current staff capacity and determine the need for additional staff to achieve strategic goals. And what it comes down to really is looking at staff capacity and making a choice between contracting out work to consultants or doing more work in-house. And in fiscal year 21, for example, our payroll is about, and benefits is about 426,000, and our projects and consulting are 744,000. So the work needs to be done. It's kind of like, what's the best and most effective way to do the work that we're taking on? And there are pros and cons to each position. So if we do an entry-level planner, you know, there's some advantages and disadvantages that I'm going to go over. I'm hardly going to go over it all because Dave has a presentation that I think just does a great job with it. And the other choice, of course, is contracting out the planning work, and that has some advantages and disadvantages. And if we do choose to do an entry-level planner, it'll cost about $84,000 a year, and that would be taken from basically contracting and consulting fees. We'd spend it on staff instead. So With that, Dave's going to do the presentation, and then if we could come back and hear from the TAC on their opinions, that would be helpful. Dave?
Dave, if you're talking, we can't hear you, but it looks like you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes, and we can hear you.
Excellent. So, as Jeff said, what's really the best way for us to deliver the best service to the region and our member organizations? And what would a transportation planning position look like if that's really to our advantage to do? So in this presentation, I want to walk through some of those advantages and disadvantages and provide you a sense of the work that we would have a planner do. So if we were to do in-house planning, there are some advantages to this. It's much more responsive. We're close to home. We can be nimble to emerging situations, as kind of, for instance, the planning for the Lone Tree overpass and the hospital relocation all came up at the same time. And being able to shift some resources, or actually to have resources to shift to that, would be possible with an additional planning staff. It shows there's a little more investment in the community and the ability to build relationships at more levels across our partners. There's accountability by doing this stuff in-house. We would own those products, not just own the product from a consultant, but we would be responsible for it, assuming that we do a good job, and I think we do. It helps build regional credibility. So, that credibility lies with us, not just in the people or the consulting firms that we hire. It really expands the capacity, or moves towards capacity building for the organization, as we are able to step into more arenas and learn and develop those skills. And then it optimizes time for other staff. I think the example that Jeff has developed is the idea of having a CPA firm, and then having the CPA, have to do the bookkeeping, and take away from really doing that primary work for the clients. Well, if they had a bookkeeper, that might be a better use of that time. So what happens on the other side of that coin in terms of disadvantages? Well, there's a degree of expertise. Consulting firms quite often are large, multidisciplinary, and they can bring that resource immediately to bear. And so you don't have those learning curves that in-house staff might, or even training needs. There's perception. Sometimes elected officials or the public will look at locals and say, well, you're just local, what do you know? Let's bring in a real expert from outside. And there are times when it's like, yeah, we really need that expertise, or yeah, we really want to stand side by side or even behind a consultant, depending on the topic at hand. And then there's the opportunity cost to larger projects. As Jeff said, we would be taking the funds out of our consulting contract. And so there may be times when we really have a project that we need to consult for, but by virtue of funds going to a transportation planner, we might have to roll up funds for a couple of years to pay for that. Then, if we look at consulting, what are the advantages and disadvantages of that? Well, going with consultancy, these are kind of the mirror images of the previous discussion. There's perception. Some are going to be viewed as the real experts on topics, and in fact, may be the real experts on topics. And so there's a little more trust in perhaps what they produce. There's a perspective advantage. I do my best to learn what's going on in the world. That said, I've been in flag 25 years in terms of doing this job, and that's my primary perspective. Consultants work with a wide range of clients and can bring those lessons here to the region. And then there's adaptability. Again, they're often larger firms, multidisciplinary, and they have the expertise you need when you need it. So why might we not go with a consultant? Again, responsiveness. Even though they're larger firms, their availability fluctuates. Some of you may have heard me say that as long as I have eye contact with the consultant, I believe them when they say, "You're my most important client." But as soon as that eye contact is broken, it's the next client in the pipeline or the next client on the phone. And so their availability changes, their personnel fluctuates. Many of you are involved in the Milton Corridor study. Well, what happened right at the beginning of that study? Half the consulting team jumped ship. We were fortunate enough that they jumped ship within the larger planning team. But if they had left to another organization, we would have gotten an entirely different crew. And that's not necessarily who we signed on. The expertise is temporary. Consultants come into town, they do their job, they leave town. And so, you may have a product with some recommendations, but how well do you really understand the analysis behind it? How much, how strong are you ready to act on it? So that expertise comes and goes versus, as you develop and grow that in-house, it's there with you. There can be issues with product and data ownership. Usually you contract that stuff in terms of a term of the contract, but there's sometimes it's proprietary and you don't have access to how that works. And then quality assurance. Yes, it's up to our project managers to make sure we get a strong quality product, but there's going to be a clock and a budget that runs out on a consultant, where if it's owned in-house, you can usually clean things up later if you need to. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of doing it in-house or going with consultancy. So if we were to hire a transportation planner, what kind of things would they be doing? I could see them being taking over the transportation improvement program. I think, Jason's on the phone. There's a lot of administrative duties that just need to be handled, advertising and other things that I think a planner, entry-level planner would be well suited for. Development review as needed. There's a lot of projects that are taking place and keeping our fingers on the pulse of those, just so we're aware, if there's going to be impact to a road of regional significance or need for coordination across agencies, that we can stay on top of that, bring the RTP recommendations to bear within that process in more meaningful and relevant ways. And then just, any job, as we all know, there's a lot of scheduling meetings, note-taking and other stuff, as well as just setting those things up. It takes time. And transportation planner would be well suited to establishing those kind of relationships and getting this moving. So we always have projects that are ongoing and need certain types of support: data collection and analysis, GIS mapping and analysis, graphics and infographics are becoming more important and being able to do those. Literature review and best practices, especially if we're doing stuff in-house and not bringing in outside expertise, well, then we need to step outside ourselves, do that literature review, do that best practice review, and bring those lessons to bear here. Coordination with all of your respective planning processes: corridor plans, area plans, neighborhood plans, state transportation plans, and just being able to be fully engaged as an organization with those processes. having, an extra set of eyes, ears, and hands would be useful. So some of the more specific projects that are coming up, and some of these are enumerated in the strategic work plan, is looking at the VMT reduction strategies. We should see a lot of that coming out of the RTP process, but there may also be some specific actions that need follow-up. Mobile apps for trip planning or trip payment. The ITS strategy we'll be talking about later. Going to discuss those and really following through on maybe a procurement process and getting that going be a good project for this individual. Same with smart grid electrification and car charging to coordinate with the city sustainability and others. We want to look heavily into funding research and making sure we can quantify funding needs and see if we can't align funding across all our needs a little more proactively. And then a couple of important corridor plans in our work program and just the support role on all those things I mentioned earlier, data analysis, GIS analysis, and the like. Longer term, some of the things we need to evaluate: the Lone Tree traffic interchange, Soitzer Canyon connection, Camp Navajo and freight planning, ITS, and travel demand management. These are all either large projects that are set in the future that need vetting, or they're just longer term projects that need nurturing over time and constant support to make sure that they happen and move forward. So when we presented this to the management committee, the management committee was very supportive and mentioned several things that are worth repeating here. There's a lot of federal funding coming our way. We're seeing that through the COVID relief actions and discussions on infrastructure plans that are taking place now. And we should be prepared for that and getting projects as shovel ready as possible. And we can't have, as one member said, we can't have a lack of staffing be the pinch point that prevents us from really pursuing these opportunities. So kind of the last bullet here is the idea of succession planning. Pretty short ladder here at Metro Plan. And no offense to Rosie, but she's not exactly on the technical ladder, if you will. So having additional staff, being able to build more institutional knowledge across more bodies, and preparing for succession planning would be helpful, and having that transportation planner position would help us do that. So that concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back to Jeff and then be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC. Really, I'd just like to turn it back over for discussion and hearing what you think.
Does anyone have any questions for Jeff or Dave, or any comments?
I'd like to jump in, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for the presentation, Dave. I had heard that I had some questions come from Shane from Management Committee asking about this, and I hadn't seen it yet at TAC. So now I'm connecting all the dots. This is helping the order of operations. So I was kind of going back and forth with your initial slides as to whether this seemed like a staff position or a consultant. But then as you presented the likely projects and tasks, it felt very much like an entry-level planning staff position. So I think working with you for many years, you definitely could use some help being a one-man show, and no offense to Jeff or Rosie, but being a one-man show on the technical modeling side is really, really tough. And I know you jump in to help us out quite a bit, and it's not always, you don't always know when we're coming and asking for help. So having a little bit of redundancy would be huge for you. So yeah, I'm really supportive of this. Makes sense to me.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Chair, this is Ann. I have a comment.
Go ahead, Ann.
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation. I guess echo Jeff's comment. The staff capacity gap is definitely looking ahead with all the projects. I think transportation planner position would be really helpful to the organization. I am curious from a long-term perspective on your operating budget, because I heard Jeff mention that the idea is to pull the salary from what you would typically spend on consultants. And my understanding of MetroPlan's budget cycles is you get a typical amount for operating that you can run your organization. And then there are occasionally funds, and I know you've built up funds for consultants for projects and then are going after grants, obviously. But I'm curious how you're going to transfer that idea of a salary coming out of what might not be ongoing funds into your operating budget. So that would be my only question for that, because I would imagine what you would want this person not to be a limited term appointment. So other than that, I think it's a great idea. I still see obviously a huge need for certain deliverables that MetroPlan has with consultants. That really, are you going to have all the software and the person power to crunch out some of the deliverables that I think consultants are geared up and teed up for? And so that's I think there's still a really appropriate role for consultants for different projects. But I think having that planner being able to kind of run the internal process and provide input and kind of be the glue for a lot of this would really be helpful to, it seems like, Dave and the organization. So yeah, I think those are my comments. Thanks.
I have a answer to some of that. Yeah, what I'm hearing, Anne, is that a concern that the position might not be sustainable because we get formula funding, and in a number of years, we might not have enough money to actually fund this position. And a couple of comments on that. The first is that it is sustainable with the formula funding we have, but it reduces the amount that is available to projects that we might do. And that's a definite concern. The second answer I have to that is I'm comfortable with hiring temporary positions and saying your job is contingent on us being successful in getting additional grants. So let's stay really focused, let's deliver, and they're part of the team and getting the work done. You know, an organization where we did that successfully working together before. And I think that works well. And the other thing I want to say is, I appreciate really, Jeff, Dave referred to a short ladder, and it's really maybe a stool. And Jeff Bowman's comment is right on. I'm not a technical planner. I'm a guy who loves Flagstaff, who loves transportation. But what I do is really finance and politics and organizational stuff. So I could not replace Dave. I just couldn't do what he does. So I appreciate the opportunity perhaps to bring in somebody else who has that training and discipline and expertise, who can learn a lot from Dave, at this time. So maybe that's a much longer answer and answered things you didn't even ask, but I wanted to share it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or discussion on this item? All right.
I had a question. This is Dan. So just logistically,
Go ahead.
I guess the Metro Plan is still, you're renting downtown offices. Do you have a place for this person to work, or is it going to be another remote situation?
We will have a place for this person to work, and it also might be a remote situation.
So they don't have to live in Flagstaff to be the Metro Plan planner?
I don't know. MetroPlan doesn't have a policy requiring that, as you know. I would say we're going to hire the best person for the job.
Well, I would certainly encourage that person to live in Flagstaff so they can work with all of the partners on the day-to-day stuff that they're going to have to work on. So that's my 2 cents on that issue.
Thank you.
And it looks like we're not seeking a motion on this item. Anything else we need to touch on this, Jeff or Dave, before we move on to the next one?
I'm good.
I'm good, thank you.
Good. And just letting you know that I am supportive of this as well. So, all right.
Thank you.
Of course. That'll take us to item B, the project priorities matrix update. Dave, you're listed on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So part of the strategic work plan is to revisit the prioritization process that we went through a couple of years ago. And really today, just seeking endorsement of that process. I looked through it. I think it still seems sound and relevant. And if that's the case, we'll kick it off again. And Jeff or Rosie, if you want to bring up the staff report, I'll just walk through it
Oh, yeah.
pretty quickly. But basically, we started off with a survey, said, what are your top 5 projects, and put that out to each of the agencies. And that's probably the thing that's changed. A number of these projects are underway, kicking off, and new projects have emerged. And so we want to be sure to capture those and fold those into the process. And then we work through this kind of 3-tiered effort, if you will. And you might recall we scored things from 1 to 5. And one of it was urgency. Is there a project that's kind of on the cusp that really needs attention? The other was importance. How important is this? It's more of a scale. Things can be urgent and not so important, or they can be urgent and important. We wanted to get a sense of both of those. And then there's this question of MPO involvement. What should Metro Plan be doing? And there was a number of criteria that went into that, including, does your agency have staff available? Is there a need for additional funding? Is this a really long-term project that's more in Metro Plan's long-term planning horizon than in perhaps the current planning or project delivery modes that our member agencies can be in? And again, to kind of refresh your memory, we went through that. I met with you all individually as agencies to talk through that, and then took that internally, looked to see where there were duplicates, maybe did a little bit of normalizing of scores, and then brought that back to you all for vetting. And then finally, we broke that down into activities that we would be involved in. Sometimes it's planning, sometimes it's pursuit of funding, sometimes we're the lead, sometimes we're just providing support, and so broke it down into that level, and then took it to the board for endorsement in terms of the priorities. And that really helps us flesh out the strategic work plan. It informs all of us in terms of what Metro Plan should be doing and can be looked for support. And it was just, I hope we all found it useful. I think the board found it useful. Certainly I did. And we have as Metro Plan staff referred to that on many occasions. And it's particularly germane right now, since we have 6 out of 7 new board members who have not really seen this process and really have the right, if you will, to weigh in on it and take a look at it for themselves. So again, what I'm looking for today is, if you guys are comfortable with that process, we'll kick it off again. And our objective in the strategic work plan is to bring that back to the board at their meeting in early October. So I'll turn it to Jeff. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I appreciate you running through it. I know we've got a matrix that did you want to show that next month after we just go?
Well, I think the matrix is in here as attachments. If you want to scroll down to it. There it is. And so this is really just the top 20 or so projects. I think we ended up with close to 100. So you can see this idea of regional importance and then action and need. I'm sorry, I maybe misspoke there earlier. Is there a plan that exists, or is there funding that exists or is needed? Was this third category? So you can see the inputs to the different categories. In this case, I believe this is sorted by overall, the total on the far right by overall importance. In our presentation, we I think also sorted it by Metro Plan involvement to see where Metro Plan really needed to be engaged. And then the next slide is really just the survey, which was asking questions about about what your top 5 are and what do you need and some of those aspects. So happy to take any input if there were questions or concerns about this process last time. Love to hear those, and we'll try to make some tweaks to it before we go back out.
All right, we'll go ahead and open discussion. Any comments, questions for Dave and Jeff? Go ahead, Ann.
Thanks, Nick. I guess maybe just a few comments, especially since you are bringing this forward to a new board, trying to understand, they're being inundated with all kinds of projects and processes that Metro Plan has. And so I think when I even read the TAC report, I'm very supportive of the matrix, the process that you've outlined and how you've gone through the methodology that's involved with the project assessment. I think that's totally sound. I think what was a little confusing, I think even as a TAC member, when I read the staff report, I was trying to understand, are you asking the board, in other words, I would probably preface this graph, which saying this was, draft assessments from last year board, we will be seeking your input going forward, because I think when they see this, they're going to think that, oh, it's been done. What are all these numbers? So you might just need to clarify that we're going to start this process and that it's Metro Plan's projects, right? It's not, because you're going to get into the RTP and be looking at projects through that projects within projects. So I think they could get really confused fast, because your RTP, I imagine, is going to generate a list of needs and projects. And so how does that relate to what this is? I think that's going to be an important distinction, I would think, for the board. And I think just confirming I'm on the same page. So I think that was my only comment. This matrix looks great, but just make sure it says draft so that they're not thinking that it's a done process.
Thank you, Anne, for that clarification. We can certainly update the staff report for that clarification. And I think your comment about the RTP is relevant as well. They may wonder, so, well, why are we doing the RTP if we've got this list of projects here? And So I think that does bear some explanation. So thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. Dave, I'll chime in real quick too, that I usually don't like chatting too much as chair, but I do want to bring up on kind of my thoughts on this one. That I appreciate the process. I think it was really a good effort, you know, bringing all this information together. And I know you did a lot of work kind of compiling the scoring, but a request that I would send to you is doing a two-step process with the TAC members, starting it off of submit your projects for a project list, have you compile this project list, and then have that entire list go out to all the TAC members. Because I know it was kind of weird last time around where the county wanted to chime in on a few city projects and said, you know, we think these are important. We think MetroPlan can play a good role in it. But I see this kind of as an issue that we as the county might think that we have a project that's the greatest thing out there. And we think that this is just perfect for MetroPlan and we need your help on it and we need a ton of time committed to it. But the other member agencies might not agree, NATA, the city. And we want to, you know, get that, solicit that input of, you know, is there agreement, is there not? And kind of have all of the agencies rank all of the projects. So it's not just us talking about our own and then compiling it from there. Because again, too, that the county might think our county project's the greatest thing, but where does it rank with all the other member agencies? And that's where I see the importance of MetroPlan's effort, is if there's something that's NAU and NATA and city and maybe a little bit of county, like that's the primo project to be on.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you for the input. So what I understand is to solicit projects from the individual members in terms of are their new top projects, but at that point, not necessarily have them score them, and then put out the entire list. I guess part of my concern with that is it's a pretty darn long list, and asking everybody to plow through that makes. I guess I have some concern in terms of the you know, the kind of the fatigue by the time you get down to project 84, where focusing on your own projects and then seeing it later. Let me give some thought to that. I'm just kind of babbling right here right now, but let me give some thought to that. I'd love to hear some input from some of the others in terms of their thoughts on just going through the list once, if you will.
I have a question, but if I could jump in before that, Mr. Chairman, because I wanted to clarify as well, the submitting requests for the project list and then put out the entire list to everyone. As I hear the discussion, I'm wondering if MetroPlan might want to ask, give the criteria to the member agencies and ask them to do some prioritization and send us their top 3 or top 5 or something like that. And I'd be interested what Dave thinks of that too. If that's
I think that's basically what we did before. And I think now with the matrix in hand, we could ask, you know, we asked them each to score their projects according to the matrix. And then we put the matrix together, did some normalization, looked at duplicates, and then came back out with the entire list for the group to review to see if they concurred with the findings. What I'm hearing is, you know, the county, and they did last year, weigh in on projects out, you know, that were not within their jurisdiction, but felt for the region. They took a regional approach to it as opposed to a jurisdictional approach. And I guess I'd like to hear what the rest of the committee has to say on that. If, you know, they're comfortable stepping outside their lane, so to speak, or if they would prefer, you know, kind of staying within their own jurisdiction and then seeing it in the larger context after the fact.
Any comments?
Mr. Chair, I raised my hand.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. So I remember last time we spent a decent amount of time talking about all of our different projects with the different agencies because I think we weren't all familiar with each other's projects, and that was kind of fun to go through some of that. I like Nick's suggestion of us being able to take a look at other agencies' projects because I think there is some coordination, obviously, that goes on between agencies. It seems like it'll be easier this time because you have the matrix already built. Last time it was a whole kind of different thing. There was a pretty big learning curve, I thought, for a lot of people to figure this out, including me. Have you taken a look? Is there a lot of turnover, or is it like 10% turnover? I took a look and it seemed like a lot of the things we were interested in last year are still out there. So it feels like it's not people could vote differently, but the project list feels like it's going to be similar going forward.
I think you're right that the project list is going to be similar going forward, and so maybe when I put out that list, maybe this is a compromise here, Nick, is to send out last year's matrix with the ask for people to augment it, and then people can see that list more completely. Not just the top 20 that I have in the list. And I think when I send it out, I can put in a status, update it with a status position in terms of, at least to the best of my knowledge, if it's somewhat out of our wheelhouse, just to let people know it's like, yeah, we're actively engaged in this. We, like the RTP, we're just getting ready to close procurement and initiate that. And so, people can know it's like, oh, well, I can take this one off the list and maybe this next thing will move up in priority. And am I comfortable with that? So I'd be happy to do that. I think that would add some value. And Nick, if that would kind of meet your part of your expectation, I'd like to know.
I definitely think it's moving in the right direction, and I'd like to see that happen. I think that would be good. And it's really just, again, to that, I see Metro Plan, its role here, bringing all of us member agencies together, and kind of what Jeff touched on too. This is where I learn about everyone's projects. Like, I don't hear about most of them, outside of these meetings, but, few and far between. But really, I see us all coming together, all of our voting agencies, having our say in it. And, where we get concurrence is where Metro Plan should be heading. That if only one member likes one project, is that a priority? Or do we have 6 of them that, we really see this as important? That I think getting the input of the group is just paramount moving forward. So thank you all. And with that, Dave, Jeff, are we looking for a motion on this item?
No, Mr. Chair. I think just direction from the TAC in terms of how to move forward. And I think I have that.
Excellent.
Mr. Chair.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just want to say how much I appreciate the discussion because it's much clearer. I think it just makes the process better, more engaged, more focused. So thank you for the discussion.
Thank you all. Any further comments on this item, or can we move on to item C? All right, hearing none, we'll keep going. Title VI Plan and Accomplishments Report. Rosie?
Thank you, Chair. So I have a brief Title VI training. This is our annual compliance requirement. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions about the report and the plan that were provided in the packet. Give me just a second to set that up. Okay, so just to confirm, you can see the FY22 Title VI plan.
Yes.
Thank you. So as I said, Title VI, this is our annual Title VI compliance training. Why do we have Title VI? It is to comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where any federal program prohibits discrimination on the grounds of race, color, national origin, in programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. That Title VI Act was updated in 1994 with the Clinton executive order expanding where it was expanded to include environmental justice for minority and low-income populations, including seniors and disabled persons, specifically in transportation and other projects. These are our Metro Plan boundaries. They include the greater Flagstaff area, including part of Doney Park and Fernwood Timberline. Oh, the whole area you see here. Fernwood Timberline. Can you see my pointer? Okay, great. Doney Park, Fort Valley, Belmont, Kachina Village, and Mountain Air. Here you see an update of our local populations by demographics. A key item to pay attention to is our LEP population, estimated to be about 3.9% of our population in the Flagstaff region, which is important for our Title VI plan and making sure we are reaching our limited English population. Our Title VI goals and strategies are basically, we are committed to preventing discrimination and to fostering a just and equitable society. This includes making transportation decisions that strive to meet the needs of all people, enhancing the public involvement process to reach all segments of the population, and ensure all groups have a voice in the transportation planning process. Provide the community with opportunities to learn about and improve the quality and usefulness of transportation in their lives. Improve data collection, monitoring, analysis tools that assess the needs of and analyze the potential impacts of transportation plans and programs on Title VI protected populations. Avoid disproportionately high and adverse impacts on Title VI protected populations. And of course, comply with the requirements of Title VI and accompanying rules and orders. Some ways we accomplish this routinely are our vendor contracts use ADOT's DBE program, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. Both of our executive board and technical advisory committee meetings are always open to the public, even when they are remote only. We have full transparency on our website, including prominent display of the notice to the public, the Title VI notice to the public. The full agenda packet is available at least 24 hours before the meeting, and meeting dates are posted ahead of time. Additionally, the Title VI annual plan and accomplishment reports are available on the website upon adoption. This is new that I'm sharing this year about our limited English proficiency and translation services. As part of Title VI, we are required to provide interpretation and translation services upon request. So if any member of the public ever requests either translation or interpretation services, please reach out to any Metro Plan staff or myself, of course, and we will arrange services. I will note that to date, I'm not aware of that, of us ever having the need for either translation or interpretation services. Finally, our complaint procedures. This is something I'm adding from last year. Basically, a requirement of Title VI is that any person who believes they are a member of a specific class or connection with a minority contractor has been subject to discrimination under Title VI, that they may file a complaint. So as of this week, the Title VI and ADA complaint form is now available on Metro Plan's website. And also, if anybody ever has any questions or wants to make a complaint, you can one, forward them to our website, or two, they can reach out to me directly. And that concludes the Title VI presentation.
Any
Are
questions?
there
for
any
us?
questions? Thank you.
Go ahead, Ann.
Sure, just a comment. Thank you, Rosie. I really appreciate, I know how much effort it probably is to wrestle a program and get everything up to speed with website and all of those pieces. There's a lot involved there. And I guess whenever I see a plan like this, which I know is kind of an ongoing plan that requires updates, it's just a good reminder of, we serve the public, and this is, we're so engaged in the technical and the project delivery aspects that I think, when an item like this comes up, for me, it's just a good reminder of who we're doing the work for. So thanks.
Thank you, Anne.
Any others?
I have a comment. This is Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
So I think last month I mentioned when we were talking about the mini grant that was created to do bike ped transit facilities. I think my suggestion was, yeah, it'd be great if we could even target some of these, I think it's these neighborhoods. Do we call them the Title VI neighborhoods? So you've got the maps at the end of this report that shows some demographic information. And this is what I was trying to explain, was it'd be another great accomplishment, I think, is if we could focus these improvements in some of these neighborhoods, if that's possible. And then once again, you have my title wrong. This is the second report where you've got a title that doesn't exist in the city. I'm the Community Development Director. I've been that for 3 years. Development Services Director, I don't know where that came from, but before that I was the Planning Director. So I'd appreciate it if you could get that straight. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. We'll change that. I would like to add that the Title VI plan is pending map updates, and the plan is due mid-August, and we don't have a meeting before it's due. So we wanted to present it ahead of time, but we are waiting on the maps to be updated, just the demographic maps with the New Year's data, and also the accomplishments report is only about 90% complete. We're waiting for the year to end to make sure everything, all the counts are accurate. I don't know that the goals for next year won't change, but the accomplishments could possibly change a little bit. And they just won't be presented to the board again, or the TAC again, before they are submitted to ADOT.
Go ahead, Ann.
Sorry, I was trying to find the raise hand button. I'm just pondering Dan's comment about the Title VI and relative to equity and projects. And I think, he brings up actually a good point about thinking back to the project matrix. And I can't remember if consideration of weighting of projects had a Title VI component in that project matrix. Again, very high level, because I know some of these projects range from a variety of types, but I think Dan brought up a really good point as a reminder of, bringing that framework into the planning process and prioritization process, I think is important for thinking about Title VI populations while we're doing this planning process. So thanks, Dan.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to respond to that.
Go ahead, Jeff.
One, I think it's a great point, and we can, when we put the criteria together for the next round of grants, we can discuss whether or not we want to put that in. I don't think now is really the time to discuss it, and partly because we still have so much more on this agenda to get through. And I really appreciate, though, the connection with the other things, and we'll make note of it and bring it back.
Perfect. Thank you. Rosie, are you looking for a motion on this one?
Yes, Chair. Yes, we are looking for a motion. Thank you.
Looks like we're looking for a motion to endorse the adoption of the FY22 Title VI plan. Is there anyone willing to make that motion?
This is Anne, so moved.
Okay. Motion by Ann. Do we have a second?
This is Jason James. I will second that motion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So motion by Ann, second by Jason. Any further discussion? Perfect. We'll take it to a vote. Those in favor, aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Perfect. With that, we'll move on to item D, ITS strategy and grant. Dave, you want to take this one away?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my screen again. I have another short PowerPoint. Would you confirm that you can see the screen?
Yes, and we can hear you.
Great, thank you. So, as you know from past updates, MetroPlan's working on this regional ITS strategy, and really along with the need for such a strategy, part of the tactical reason for this is an anticipated technology deployment grant submitted to USDOT. We believe it's going to be at the end of August if it mirrors last year. So what I would like from you all today is three things. One is find that the strategy document to date and the methodologies developed support a shift in focus from completing the strategy to really working on the grant application. And the concurrence that given the Proposition 419 funds are directed to smart signals, and those are the match funds that we have available, and that we need fiber communications to support them, that really should be the grant focus. And then an endorsement that we take a two-pronged approach up through mid to late June, that we look at a partner-focused project and a city-focused project, and then make a choice between those two. And I'll run through the advantages and disadvantages of those a little bit in the presentation. So looking really again for find, concur, and endorse at the end of this presentation. So, my hope had been to be further along in the process, but we're doing fairly well. A funny thing happened along the way to completing this strategy. The hospital decided to relocate and required a whole lot of analysis. So similar to our earlier discussion, and I think it really is germane, not just to that discussion, but to this one as well. Whether it's the hospital, whether it's the Lone Tree Overpass, whether it's, what's the new transit route that we're anticipating, data and information and informed decision-making are really key. And a strong ITS system can help bring in that data and manage that data. So it's valuable that we, have a good collective strategy that we want to move on. So we're making good progress, as you can see here, in terms of many of the things that we're working on. So kind of here's a preview of the plan's cover page. I want to give a shout out to Brianna Fimbres, our current Montoya Fellow, for putting this together. I think she did a fantastic job. Her last day is this Friday. She's already moved to Portland for her master's program starting this fall, master's in transportation planning. So, we've all been a positive influence. At the heart of the strategy, we're looking at purpose and need and mission, vision, and goals. And the purpose and need we have drawn on from the current RTP and other documents. You've all participated, or many of you have participated in the development of our mission and vision statements that you see here. Again, shout out to Brianna for putting these icons together. We have developed goals. Now the goals have sub-bullets to them, but these are the broader levels: data utilization, efficiency, sustainability and equity, and safety and security. And for those of you familiar with the process, you may have noticed that we have split out efficiency from sustainability. Those had been joined together before. So went through a pretty solid process to put the mission, vision, and goals together. I'm pleased with where we're at on that. We've just concluded, or some conversations on governance. Here you see the introduction to this framework for intergovernmental agreements. There's about 2 pages of bullets that give us the framework for when we are engaging collectively, bilaterally or multilaterally in an ITS project. What are those topics, and generally what do we want to discuss about them? So once we get to those projects, we have a good jump start on what that agreement should look like. And it's also a good way to demonstrate, both through the strategy and through this anticipated grant, that we're working together and that we know what we're about. So as far as existing conditions, future needs, and priority corridors, basically we're finding that the trends and forecasts support the need for ITS. We see growth in the region. We see not necessarily intersection crashes going up from the fatal and serious injuries, but if you look at that trend from 2017, 18, and 19, they're going up pretty steadily. And that's going to cause serious delay, ridership. The COVID year notwithstanding, on transit is going up. And then you see this miles of congested roadway, level of service D or better. And here I included 2040. And this is really the percent of these our major corridors that are at level of service. I'll make sure I'm looking at the right thing. I'm sorry, not the percent of corridors. I'm getting ahead of myself. Looking at the miles of roadway that are congested at D or higher, and you can see there's a trend going up. This is from the regional model, but 2040, and this is with everything that we have planned, it's going up a lot. And you can see the volume to capacity ratio is taking a jump too. So getting as much as we can out of our planned system is going to be critical. And then you can see the bullet there. We will have data forthcoming on tourism trends, which we know are going up, both the number of hotel rooms and the occupancy level, as well as road investment trends, where I think we're all familiar that we really have not been building in these last 5 years or even the years prior, much in the way of lane miles for arterials and collectors. So we put together what I'm calling a priority corridors list. The information you see on the left, this was discussion with some of the practitioners in the field in terms of what were the things that we should consider. So looked at several factors. Delay, including the average of the 2019 and 24% of the roadway length that was LOSD or worse. Then factored in those crashes per mile and signals per mile. Then I looked at fatal and serious intersection crashes per mile from the ADOT system. Total ridership from the model. You can now look at kind of a link level ridership for each route that's on that link. And then fiber. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the city has a fiber master plan on their website, and it shows the different planned fiber links and what they can serve. So it might be traffic signals, it might be other public facilities like schools, and might have an economic development. And so I just kind of went through that, and every link got a point for each one of those things that it showed up on. And welcome some input on how I broke down the corridors, but taking Butler Avenue, for instance, for its full length, it really is distinct in different parts. So really looked at kind of the downtown versus that area over to I-40, and then broke down other corridors. And so this is how the ranking broke out on these different criteria and then overall. And I'd like to go through the rest of the presentation, but I can imagine that this might be an area that you guys would like to come back to. So talked about fiber, and certainly it's going to be a key component and maybe a component of the grant as we look to expand or improve systems. And so in looking at that priority list and some of the conversations we had, a partner focus with ADOT might be to head west from the current Butler fiber system that runs here. So looking at west and maybe moving into the downtown, but also making this critical NAU connection that's needed to really support the redundancy in the larger fiber system. A city option may be looking at extending to the east up 89 and taking advantage of some of the work that's been done and extending that way. Similarly, looking at this connection down to NAU. So if we are to do a focus on smart signals and look at advanced traffic management systems, the ATMS, where do we stand? We've got a description done. We have high-level system requirements done. Our existing conditions, all the materials are in terms of inventories and conversations with different agencies. Analysis and recommendations. We have discussions about what measures we should be pursuing, and the analysis has started. We have costs in hand from a unit perspective, and so we can build those up quickly. And then we'd look at having more discussions about interagency coordination. So really starting with that I referenced earlier, fine-tuning that a little bit more for this particular type of project. And the analysis, the point I make here is that we're not going to waste any time or effort, and that we'll be doing analysis for pretty much all of the corridors, which the strategy will need, so it benefits the strategy and moving towards its completion. But we'll extract the information for these two projects to evaluate which one makes sense. And just a further note that the overall plan is organized around the 9 technology groups identified in the notice of funding opportunity for the tech deployment grant by the feds. And we're kind of at the same point in time or completion for all of those groups. So the analysis for the ATMS or smart signals, we'll look at signal and crash delay. We'll look at fatal and serious injuries by taking crash modification and reduction factors that apply to smart signals. We should be able to take delay and come up with some emissions impacts. Mountain Line is working on, has a consultant on board looking at on-time performance. And so we can look at a number of transit measures that might be influenced by that. And then hopefully the impact of operations and maintenance. That'll probably be fairly high level, but just the ability to work on things remotely saves quite a lot of travel time and efficiency. And so we'll try to capture that as much as possible. I will note, bring this to your attention, one of the things that we hope to do is monetize these benefits. The grant does not require a formal benefit cost analysis, but to the degree that you can do that, I think it's clear that it's beneficial. So we do have the intent to take things like time savings that smart signals would bring and monetizing that, as well as taking the value for different fatalities and injuries and monetizing that and so on. So we'll bring that to bear. So the two alternatives, and again, looking to see if you guys will support moving forward with both alternatives up through mid to late June, and then making a selection. If we looked at a partner focus, there are advantages. Almost every grant coming out of the feds focuses in part on partnerships. And so to the degree that you're showing you're leveraging each other's resources, you're working together as a region, it helps your competitiveness. If we were to look at partnering between the city and ADOT, obviously Milton and 66, there's a lot of traffic through there, a lot of multimodal implications. And so there could be benefits to many travelers. And based on preliminary analysis, Route 14 is the one route that is really suffering considerably from on-time performance or poor on-time performance. And so we could, bring that conversation along to see if there's opportunities to look at transit performance through a partner activity. On the downside, takes a lot more work to pull all this interagency technical and administrative issues together. And so the deadline would be pressed. That's why trying to reach a decision early on is important. And then a concern of the cities is that the city is putting up the match and making sure that the city gets a good return on its money. And so that we don't create an inequitable situation where the city is investing in an ADOT system or mountain line system or things like that. And then implementation. Should we be successful with an award, just implementation is going to be challenging, in terms of both the project itself and grant reporting and keeping those things together. If we were to do just a city focus, much simpler application implementation will be simpler. From the priority corridors, Beulah or 89 were kind of high priority corridors. Either one of those could be shown as stepping stones to future interagency collaboration. Beulah might be a jumping off point for bringing fiber into the city limits from the ADOT planned ADOT project in I-17, and certainly 89 stretches out to ADOT signals at Townsend, Winona, possible connections over to the ADOT yard. So there's opportunity, and the county yard as well. So there's opportunities there. Disadvantages: demonstrating that partnership will be difficult. It'll be weaker. And it's also deferring valuable collaboration in the ITS arena. I think is a need and opportunity for that collaboration. Is the strategy, is the grant the way to really light the fire under that collaboration? Or, is it time to just really learn more about ITS as individual agencies and work on collaboration later? So what's coming up? Again, posing this through June 25th, really finishing those analyses, the cost estimation, putting the scopes together for the project definitions, and be looking to work with some of you on that, evaluating them, and then coming up with that recommendation. And you see I have vetting highlighted here, and that's just something we're going to need to develop because we don't have a TAC meeting in June, and if we're waiting later than that, we're really pushing deadlines. So we'll have to set up a process again with some of you on how to proceed with moving through that. So again, back to the beginning, what I'm looking for is based on this, and happy to answer more questions if you have them. Is the strategy and methodology sufficient to support shifting to the grant application at this time? You concur that 419 funds really indicate we should focus on smart signals, and do you endorse this pursuit and investigation of 2 projects up through June 25th? So with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple thoughts.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. It's nice to see this all coming together. We've been seeing pieces in detail, and this is fun to see the whole overview and to the point that you're at now. This is a good slide. And then a couple slides ago, I was I'll just jump into some details. I was a little concerned about the multi-agency application disadvantages that capital cost off the city system may exceed those on the city system. I think that was a pretty critical thing for the city early on with this process. So are you seeing that any multi-agency package that's probably what's going to happen, or it's just a potential for a multi-agency? I'm not sure how far along you are in developing that multi-agency project, Dave.
So, Mr. Chair, to respond, not very far along at all. Jeff, just know that, ADOT is extending some of its, I think it's radio-based communications onto Milton and 66, and there may be an opportunity for some level of interconnect there. I think as we look at the project, is it, and we're to extend into ADOT, is it 1, 2, 5 signals? I really don't have a great sense of that right now. And I also, been learning a lot from everybody and still have a lot more to learn. But, is there a good jumping off point from a communications perspective that, can be handled without fiber and the expense of fiber? Or do we actually need fiber, and what does that look like and what does that cost? So that's a long answer. The short answer is no, not very far along with the project, and so it may exceed those. And I think at that point, that's part of the evaluation. It's like, we've kind of crossed that bridge, and it's, we need to, or we're faced with that bridge and we don't want to cross it. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think I would just reemphasize that's a pretty critical element for us. I mean, the city's excited about the grant opportunity. I think this would be a really great way to see some interagency coordination that is going to be hard to accomplish with single source projects. If there's a city funded project alone or an ADOT funded project alone, those are unlikely to have this kind of coordination. So this seems like a really good opportunity to get things off the ground, but it's kind of a first. The city has a project going, but this is a higher level. So I would completely agree. More complex, I would probably triple emphasize that this is going to be really, really tricky to implement multi-agency wise. But I like the path you're on, creating two. I think it says 2 projects, one city focused and one multi-agency, and to see how they stack up at the end. Am I understanding that correct? That's your plan, and I like that if that's what your plan is.
That is my plan. And then by June to say, no, we've got a clear front runner here, both against maybe practicalities like this second bullet under disadvantage, but there's also, as we look at the strength, as we understand it from the grant criteria, what do we think is really going to be the stronger project? And, we have to have confidence that we can implement it. And so there will be, a fair number of conversations with all parties, particularly on the multi-agency front. I have far fewer concerns as the advantages and disadvantages indicate for a city focus in terms of, getting all the permits, getting all the coordination. I mean, it's much simpler.
But less competitive, because that's a clear goal of this grant program. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Okay. This probably is going to be a tough decision in June. But I look forward to getting to that point. You've been working on this for a while. We've been chipping in a little bit, and it's exciting to get to this point. So here we go.
Here we go.
Go ahead, Ann.
Looking for my hand button, couldn't find it. I appreciate Jeff's comments, and really impressed by your thoughtful grant package presentation that how it ends up getting submitted. If you have this kind of background and package, it's very, I don't know, visually appealing, and I think, you know, would read really well if, you know, when you're able to submit a grant. So this is super well thought out. Really appreciate the city's, you know, potential commitment for the match on a grant like this. And, you know, I think the complexities of all the technology, it definitely makes sense for interagency coordination, you know, whether or not the project's a city focus. I know from Mountain Line's perspective, any of these corridors that you had prioritized would be awesome if they were, you know, updated with fiber and potential smart signals. So some here might know Mountain Line does have a technology grant for Mountain Line to purchase a TSP system. So we'll be going through procurement for that in the next potential 6 months. But that kind of system, you know, really can sit on top of, you know, an updated ITS system is my understanding. So I think we're starting to move lockstep together with this type of technology development. And I really like the interagency approach. And this is a great type of project, I think, for Metro Plan to be spearheading this effort with the grant. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further comments or questions? All right. And Dave, I believe you're seeking a motion on this one as well, correct?
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate to get a clear message to the management committee and board. We'll be looking for their guidance as well.
Okay. And can you help us structure that motion, the ask that you have, just to support?
I think that, yeah, so would move that the strategy document supports shifting to the grant application that focus on smart signals, and that staff should evaluate 2 projects and reach a conclusion by June 25th on the focus of the grant.
All right. Does anyone want to make that motion?
This is Greg. I'll make that motion as Dave stated it.
Good.
I'll second that. This is Dan.
So motion by Greg, second by Dan. For any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That'll take us on to item E, the RAISE grant. Jeff, do you want to take that away?
I do. Thank you. I'm putting it up on the screen. And recommendation here is that the TAC support a coordinated effort to pursue a RAISE grant. And I'm calling this downtown mile projects. Other people came up with that language. And it ties to the related strategic work plan item that we discussed at length last month. I remember Rick Barrett was in that meeting, and lots of other folks here, and we've really changed this work plan item, which was to evaluate how we can best support the Milton Railroad underpass and consider everything else with the downtown mile projects. So we have, over the past month, a lot has been happening. And I think, as you all know, this nexus of projects is incredibly complex in one very small space, and includes the Army Corps and BNSF and the city and Mountain Line and ADOT. It's very complicated. And the idea came out of a meeting with city staff and Mountain Line staff primarily, that I think Mountain Line coordinated a couple of weeks ago. And the idea was to go ahead and write a RAISE grant, Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. It's the new name for the BUILD grant. And wanted us to, the idea is to write a grant for a consulting team to come in and look at all these projects and help us figure out, how they will be phased, how the designs will tie together. And as we talked it through, I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but MetroPlan perhaps I volunteered to lead kind of a grant writing effort to pull the different partners together and get a grant submitted. And things continue to develop, and the city, I think it's fair to say, concluded they're really close to all this stuff and been working it for a long time. And even though MetroPlan could submit the grant, on behalf of really all of the partners and all of the projects, the city was interested in submitting the grant. Contracted with WSP to write the grant. And I think essentially at this point, and city staff or others in the room, if you understand it differently, please let me know, because I know this is pretty fluid. But my approach at this point is to just work with the consultant who the city hired, try to do what I can to make sure the consultant's given the information they need, and help get letters of support, and then they and the city will submit the grant. So I wouldn't say it's a huge role for MetroPlan. It seems like something we can do to be supportive, which is what the objective was. And we've got a lot of staff in the room, right now, is this being the technical advisory committee. And I would just like to hear, your thoughts on this approach.
Any comments, questions?
This is Dan. I have not been as directly involved, but yeah, everything Jeff has said is my understanding. I think we have a meeting at 4 today, Jeff, right, with the big team on this grant. So yeah, we're looking forward to CD will support the team wherever we can in preparation of the grant. So thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else?
All right, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that we need a motion on this, really. I know I framed the agenda topic that way.
Okay.
I think really just direction from the group in the sense of the TAC is okay.
Well, I've only heard support so far. I'm supportive of what you presented. Does anyone have anything contrary to that? Perfect. I think we're good to move on to the next item if you're okay with that, Jeff.
That sounds good.
Okay. Let's go to item F, Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is actually a nice follow-on to the last two presentations talking about the RAISE grant and the technology deployment grant. And the idea here is to make sure that those are well captured in the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. And so we're looking for a motion to approve a TIP amendment to address not only the RAISE grant that Jeff just mentioned and the technology deployment grant, but also the loan tree authorization request. For those of you who may not be aware, the city requested that of Tom O'Halloran to submit an $8 million authorization request to go into the next highway bill, and that has been submitted. Don't know where that's going to go, but it's in the process. And then the last one is Mountain Line is looking to submit a grant for support vehicles. So we would put all of these in the last year of the TIP, in an illustrative year, because these are not fiscally constrained projects, as we do not have reasonable expectation. We have high hopes, but not anticipation that they will be funded. And so those figures, the $1 million that Jeff mentioned and others are listed later in the staff report. And so we're looking for a support for the TIP amendment from this committee. Be happy to answer any questions or may defer to others in the room if they're better suited. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on this item? Perfect. I'm looking for a motion now to amend the tip, adding these 3 projects. Maybe. Is anyone willing to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. This is Dan Folk. I will make the motion to amend the tip to add these 3 projects presented in the staff report.
Four projects, please.
Sorry, 4 projects presented in the staff report.
Thank you.
Just pick one to leave out, please. No, all 4. I'm sorry, that was a mistake. All 4 projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Do we have a second?
This is Ann, I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion by Dan Folk to approve the tip amendment, adding these 4 projects, second by Ann. Any further discussion? All right, we'll take it to a vote. Those in favor, aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. All right, let's go to
Thank you,
item-
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's move to item G, RTP contract draft. Jeff, will you take this one?
Yes, thank you. And I think you can all see the staff report up on my screen or up on your screen. I'm really pleased to report the Regional Transportation Plan Contract Award. And I am asking for a motion here that the TAC endorse the findings of the review committee and pursue a contract with Burgess and Nyepel for approximately $362,793. And of course, this is strategic work plan to do this piece of work. And I think, as everybody on this committee knows, a regional transportation plan, a 25-year look that's updated every 5 years, is a core responsibility. One of the main reasons that MPOs are founded in the first place. So we're going to look out 25 years, and historically, Dave has in the past with 4 or if not 5 of these processes, we do a national search. And I make a point here that theoretically it's possible for people to do it in-house, but I really make that point for the board. I think that the people in this room know that we just don't have the breadth or depth to be able to do this level of planning. And if there's ever a place to hire consultants, the RTP is it. So we started the process 6 months ago, and a lot has been done already, and time just goes so fast. A review committee of technical staff met, and we released the RFP on March 22nd. And then this review committee that included, and I want to say some of their names here, different than the names you see up on the screen. So let me be clear here. There's a review committee and there's an advisory group. The review committee, technical staff, John Saltonstall, Allison, I can't remember last name from the county, Jenny Neiman, Greg Mace, Busy from Mountain Line, all participated in it. I'm sorry, Kevin, or Jason James was there as well. This group participated in and reviewed all of the proposals. We got 3 proposals. And then the group decided we really need to interview all of them. So they did, and they scored them. And the scores that came out were Burgess and Nyepel at 563, AECom at 538, and IBI Group at 484. And this morning, the review committee, several of the members came to the other group, the Regional Transportation Plan Advisory Group. And just a reminder, and I know this gets confusing and you guys all have a lot going on, the Regional Transportation Plan Advisory Group was formed as kind of like a steering committee for this overall process, and trying to find a way at a, policy level almost, that's not yet to the board, to look at how we weave in and handle the climate emergency and sustainability interest, along with the projects that are already approved. So the group that you can see includes actually 3 former elected officials and lots of other folks from the community. So the review committee presented to the advisory group today, and the advisory group supports going forward with Burgess and Nyepel. And we had about a half-hour discussion about it, I think. So what I am intending to do is to, well, I've actually begun negotiations with Burgess and Nyepel, drafted a contract, and I'm wanting to take this draft to the board next Wednesday and ask them to issue a notice to proceed. I've mentioned what the cost is, and it is budgeted over 2 years. And I just want to put back to the TAC, I mean, your alternatives, you're an independent group. 3 alternatives I can think of. You could support the findings of the review committee. That level of review and validating the findings would increase momentum for the choice. And it would be good if you felt comfortable doing that. You also could just say, you know what, we looked at it and we don't like this choice. We want you to go with another vendor. And I would certainly consider that. And then you could recommend we go out to bid again and start all over. And I would certainly consider that, though I'm hoping you don't do that. And there might be another alternative for this group. But my point is, really wanted to put this out there for you, and would like to hear what you think and hopefully get a motion from you today. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Mr. Hall, this is Ann. Sorry. I thank you for the background. I fully support the recommendation for Burgess and Nyepel as a sound process. And then hearing committee, so I'm very comfortable with the recommendation.
Thank you, Ann. I guess with that comment, would you actually like to make a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion that TAC endorse the findings of the Regional Transportation Plan Review Committee and pursue a contract with Burgess and Nyepel for approximately $362,793.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Jeff. I would second.
Okay. The motion by Ann and a second by Jeff. We'll move to any further discussion on this item. Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and Jeff, as we're moving into the last 21 minutes of our meeting, are we still good to keep moving through? Do we need to reorganize any items?
I appreciate that question. Let me take another quick look at the agenda.
We have the historic funding levels, the Milton discussion, and the Northern Arizona Healthcare Hospital relocation as the major items left.
Yeah, so historic funding levels we can just skip. And frankly, I didn't find time to do a staff report on this. I was working on it this morning and it's not done. So that's why it's not highlighted. Yeah, so very weighty items left though with Milton and Northern Arizona Healthcare. But I don't know how much discussion we're going to have about them. So I leave it to you, Mr. Chairman, if you want to just go in order or pull Northern Arizona Healthcare up.
I think we'll just stick with order and hopefully move through them as quickly as possible. Go ahead and start with Milton.
Okay. Dave, do you want to jump in on this one?
Sure, I'll be happy to. So the Milton Quarter Master Plan is heading into the last leg, or what appears to be the last leg, with I think a partnering meeting tomorrow afternoon to look at the vision, and then we'll be reviewing the final, and hopefully at the end of June, look at taking collective action as the partnership behind that project on approval. One of the hiccups along the way, if you will, is there's been much discussion about crossings and treatment of pedestrian facilities in general. And there's been a couple issues that have been escalated above the partnership level. And I want to thank Nate Reisner for taking the initiative to escalate that so we can keep this process moving forward. And so some of the issues, for those of you who aren't perhaps familiar with the process, are the fourth leg, and I'll look to Nate to maybe help me with this in a moment. The fourth leg at several intersections, such as Butler and Milton on that south leg, should those be included? And then there was some concerns about some of the mid-block crossings in several locations, not just on Milton, but also on 180, and whether or not the best way to address those in the plan. And one of the concerns is, ADOT has, warrant policies regarding crossings, and so feel that it's inappropriate to commit to those crossings within the plan, absent the warrant studies. And several of the partners feel concerned about not being able to really make a strong commitment to these modes within the plan. So trying to resolve that. And then the issue with the fourth leg, I should mention, is really the delay that those would cause. And I think there's also some concern with some of the other signalized crossings on Milton that are proposed, such as around the Saunders area, and the delay that those would cause. ADOT taking the position that no increase in delay over the no build condition is appropriate, and others looking to, again, advance the ped bike facilities with increased number of crossings. So if that gets resolved in a timely manner, we should be able to meet that schedule. And I think at this point, I will defer to Nate to see if I'm sure I left something out. So I believe Nate's available. Oh, I thought I saw him once upon a time.
I think he stepped out.
Okay.
I'm not seeing the participants anymore.
Okay, well, but I think that's a sufficient update. Many of you are participants in the process, so are aware. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has
Any comments or questions for Dave? All right. Thank you for that update, Dave. We appreciate it. With that, let's move to item J, NAH.
Yeah, I'm going to quickly hand this over to Jeff Bauman, Mr. Chair, but by way of introduction, Northern Arizona Healthcare is actively seeking to relocate the current hospital at the top of Beaver Street, the Flagstaff Medical Center, and relocate it to a location just on the northeast corner of Fort Tuthill. And there are a host of challenges associated with a project of that scale. And I will let Jeff Bauman talk about the process and the status. So take it away, Mr. Bauman.
Thanks, Dave and Nick. And I'll probably bounce back to you a bit, Dave. I'm not sure you're going to get off the hook that easily. This is just a general project update. As Dave mentioned, on the Northern Arizona Healthcare Campus, we had been hoping to get this in front of TAC, and part of getting it in front of TAC, just as an overview, is do we want this to be a continuing item? Do people have interest? Is this a good forum to talk about some issues? As Dave mentioned, this is a really big project, and we're early on, but looks to have some pretty significant regional impacts, especially to the city and the ADOT transportation system. So as Dave mentioned, it's a many-year project. I believe they're currently estimating build out of this project in 2065. Most of the project happens early in the first 5, 10, 15 years, but a build out of the whole site all the way through 2065, which kind of blows my mind and blows us up a bit when we think about when I think about modeling and impact analyses for such a long project. The new hospital it's more than just what's on the hill today up on Beaver and San Francisco streets. All of that stuff is moving, but then this project is even bigger than that. And I can bounce through a couple of the things. I think the hospital is quite a bit bigger. It's nearly 1 million square feet over the life, again, from now to 2065. So quite a bit bigger. They're also proposing 200,000 square feet of ambulatory. There's some housing units. I think it's currently at 177 multifamily dwelling units, 300,000 square feet of office space, couple 100,000 square feet of clinic, a couple of hotels, some research and development space, some open space, the conference center, and last but not least, a shopping center space, kind of mixed use development. So all in all, really large development, much larger than what is up on the hill today. So just taking a quick look for those that play in this round, just taking a quick look at their total trip generation. It's somewhere in the range of 50,000 daily trips coming out of this site, to give you a scale. So I don't remember, Dave, you may know it offhand what we think the current hospital site has for externals. It's closer to 20, if I remember right, maybe 18,000.
Actually, I think it's lower than that, but yeah.
Okay, so there's scale though. It's 2 to 3 times as large, this new development in site. It's, as Dave mentioned, southwest corner of the city. It's on Beulah Boulevard, just touching the north edge of Fort Tuthill, kind of along Beulah, almost all the way up to University Heights. There's a little bit of land in between the two, but it's quite a big piece of land. If you drive Beulah someday and just kind of pay attention to how long that piece of road is actually quite a bit of frontage. Where they're at right now, they have officially submitted to the city. So I know we've been talking to them for quite a long time, working on some of these traffic impact analysis early steps. We're a little hesitant to kind of distribute this information, but it's now public documents for sure, as they've submitted officially for all of their different planning approvals. And I actually don't know the titles of all those different things that they're applying for. But anyways, I'm happy to distribute some of the package or all the package of information to any of the partners on the line if you're interested in taking a closer look at this project. But just wanted to give a bit of an introduction. Really big project. We are just getting into scoping the traffic impact analysis, still figuring out where we anticipate the trips coming and going, still figuring out how many trips they're actually going to produce in each of these horizon years. And that all leads to the study intersections. We're going to be well in excess of 20 intersections that we'll be looking at for possible impacts. A large amount of their trips are going to end up on the interstate through the John Wesley Powell TI. And those interstate trips tend to go east and west, but mostly east. So we're actually taking a look at the Butler traffic interchange and the Country Club traffic interchange. So huge project and really widespread look at this thing. Through this TIA scoping process, we've included the county. So Nick has been involved in these meetings, and of course ADOT has been attending the TIA scoping meetings, and Dave as well. Dave's done a bunch of modeling and streetlight work to help us get a lot of this base groundwork figured out. So without going into a lot of specifics, because we don't know a lot yet, that's just an overview of the project, and happy to distribute information, answer any questions I might be able to. And kind of curious if people are interested in talking about this at different steps of the way, or if they feel like they have enough engagement through the normal city TIA review and development review, that this may not be a TAC item. So just throwing that out there. With that, that's what I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Ann.
Thanks, Nick. Jeff, really appreciate you bringing this forward as a TAC item just for discussion. I definitely support bringing this item, Jeff, as you see key milestones that you're working on with the TIA process. And I would support seeing this again on our agendas in the future. So really looking to Jeff to identify when it would make sense to get some TAC feedback. I guess from Mountain Line's perspective, from a we are aware of the project, and we'll be having conversations with our board about there's no transit service to this location, so that's a big piece of the conversation. And we get back to some of the bigger goals of the community with respect to equity and climate change. That's part of that conversation. Again, I know that's TAC focuses on the technical aspects of the traffic transportation impacts, but I think I would love to be able, as those conversations are playing out with Mountain Line and our board and leadership, to be able to bring back, if there's components that transit could potentially help as you're identifying mitigations for this project, if transit is an aspect of some of those mitigations, or how that can be woven into the TIA. So I think that's kind of where I'm sitting right now, but I really appreciate you bringing this forward, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Jeff or Dave, do you want to respond? And Dave, I know you have your hand up too.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate Ann's comments. As Metro Plan, we are responsible for all modes and looking at system requirements, both in the near and long term. And so, part of what we'll be looking at is transit well accommodated on site, whether that service comes tomorrow or that service comes later on, just making sure that it's well accommodated. So I'm glad you brought that up, and it is something that we need to pay attention to. And I also wanted to bring a couple other kind of Metro Plan type issues within the RTP, roads of regional significance. There's a couple here, or a few here at play actually. Beulah Boulevard being perhaps the most obvious, but then also John Wesley Powell at the airport and the TI there, and the future connection over to Lake Mary. But some of you may also recall in the RTP that there is a road north of John Wesley Powell that actually would go across I-17. And right now, the site plan is accommodating a future underpass, more or less at Purple Sage, if you're familiar with the area. And so we want to, follow that. We believe from a multimodal perspective, another trip length reduction, that connection is pretty important. Otherwise, people are traveling, if you think about Ponderosa trails, either out of their way to go to Lake Mary and back, or out of their way to go to John Wesley Powell and back. So this is important from that regard. The other one is Woody Mountain Road. And as it connects from Beulah back over to the west, and just making sure that that's accommodated. We've been working with Jeff and his staff and the developers to make sure that regional trips through movements are well accommodated and being considered. So those are just some of the things at hand I wanted to bring to this committee's attention. So thank you.
Very much. Anyone else? All right, perfect. Thank you very much. That was very valuable information. We appreciate it. With that, moving through our last few minutes, Jeff, do you want to run through those last few and see if we have anything left? Do we have anything for the executive board agenda?
Yeah, just to share with you, it's next week. So they're going to be looking at my contract. They're going to look at the budget, and we're recommending the staff position that we discussed today, and then giving them the alternative to not include the staff position and just move forward without it in the coming year. The RTAC, that's a Regional Transportation Advocacy Council, ask them to appoint an alternate. Rosie's Title VI plan, Dave's Project Priorities Matrix. I'm going to ask them to approve the contract with Burgess and Nyepel. I might be sharing historic funding levels by then if I get that work done. And then there's an ADOT work program agreement that we sign every 2 years, very administrative in nature. And that's it. This is a draft agenda. It's not the cleanest yet. But that's really, that's what we've got for the executive board. And I would just ask Dave or Rosie, did something else come up since we put this packet out that I forgot we need to share?
No,
The tip amendment,
nothing.
the tip amendment needs to be on there if it's not.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you. Any comments? Questions?
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to go back to the hospital for one more quick item.
Okay, go ahead.
So clearly the airport traffic interchange is going to be impacted by the hospital. And we know that is in the ADOT program for rehabilitation or improvement. I kind of want to put this on Jason James' radar. Knowing that the hospital is going to be impacting that site in relatively short order, there may be conversations, and I think they're already ongoing, about what that project might look like to be sure that it's, the future construction is as cost efficient and has as little impact on the traveling public as possible. So that may involve, actions on the transportation improvement program. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further comments there or for the executive board agenda? Okay, rushing through our last minute. Jeff, I do want to just jump in real quick and ask the question that is our next meeting September 1st? Are we not having a TAC meeting till then?
Well, we're not having a TAC meeting until August 26th. That is a typo. But it's August 25th. So thanks for catching that. But we do not have a meeting in June or July. At least scheduled. A special one could be called if we want to, but there's nothing on the calendar.
All right, thank you very much. Jeff, do you have any items from you, Executive Director, or item L?
No, we've only got like 30 seconds, so I think I'll leave it at that and just say thank you. It helps so much to have this level of engagement from the member agencies and your perspectives as Dave and Rosie and I do our work together. So thank you very much for making the time today.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for showing up. I think we've run through the agenda pretty well. Appreciate the discussion today, and I think we're moving forward quite well. And with that, we will adjourn at 3:30 p.m.
Excellent.